You guys have been asking me to cover the My Little Pony Lavender incident for a while now, which was created by Nora Lavender here on YouTube. And honestly, I'm mad that I didn't watch this one sooner because it is definitely in the top 3 best My Little Pony AUs thus far. Now, of course, this is an infection AU, but it has an interesting origin. The outbreak started with this little flower called Midnight Lavender, and ponies get infected simply by smelling the plant too often or for too long. And since it looks fairly similar to regular lavender, most ponies don't know that it's dangerous, at least until they actually start to get symptoms. At stage 1 of the infection, ponies will have to deal with headaches, coughing, sore eyes, nosebleeds, and fevers. And as you can see here, after infection, the pony's blood will turn like this dark purplish hue instead of the normal red color. At stage 2 of the infection, the ponies will then start to get chest pains, their cough will get worse, their hooves and their chest will start to turn purple, while their eyes get really dark, and then they'll also start to become delirious. No H2O. We also see that at this stage, ponies' ability to fly and use magic will be reduced by about 50%, which lets us know that the infected will focus more on their physical abilities instead of magic. And this makes sense when we see that at stage 3, the ponies begin to lose their sanity while gaining an insatiable hunger. They also begin coughing up blood and petals, bleeding from their face, and also losing their memories. At this stage, unicorns will lose all their magic, and Pegasus will no longer be able to actually fly. And then finally, we have stage 4, and this is where the pony goes completely insane, loses all their memories, become aggressive and cannibalistic. And if all that wasn't bad enough, we also see that once the infection gets to this stage, the pony will start to sprout vines out of their back. And while the pony is technically not alive anymore, the infection has basically hijacked their body and is using them like a puppet. And now that you understand what the infection is, let's go ahead and take a look at how this all started and see just how bad it can get. Now, chapter 1 of this AU starts with Twilight reminiscing about how nice of a place Ponyville was before ponies were consumed by this poisonous midnight lavender plant. And while she tells us that some ponies were able to escape the plague, Sweetie Belle was not amongst the lucky ones. After that, we cut to 7 months previous when this whole thing started, and we find ourselves at the schoolhouse with the Cutie Mark Crusaders and Miss Shirley. It looks like she's assigned a science project to the girls, which requires them to find a plant, dissect it, and showcase the different parts to the class. Being excited about the project, the Phillies head over to the flower shop to see what they have in stock, and this is where things get weird. When they walk inside, they notice that Roseluck has a mask over her face and her eyes have a slight purple hue to them. And while the girls can sense that something is off, they don't question Rose when she says that she's fine, because they're kids and they really don't have any reason not to trust this adult. Changing the subject, Sweetie Belle mentions that the shop smells fantastic, and Rose informs them that they're smelling a special kind of lavender. Since the girls seem interested, Rose takes them to the back to get a closer look. And when they see how exotic these flowers look, they know that they need to use one of them for their science project. But then we see that Sweetie wants to get a better smell of the flower, and as she inhales the scent, it's almost like she becomes addicted to it in real time, saying, "Is this what nature feels like?" and asking, "Why does it smell so beautiful?" But before she can get even more lost into the smell, the other Phillies snap her back to reality, and the group decide that they're definitely going to use the lavender plant for their project. But before they can leave with the flower, they hear something slamming against the wall in a different room. And while the girls are curious about it at first, when Rose tells them that it's just her cat, they leave without asking any more questions, wanting to get started on their project ASAP. Once the girls leave, Rose goes to the back room of her shop and begins speaking to Lily. We learn that it wasn't a cat making noises in the back, but rather another pony named Daisy who seems to be sick due to the lavender flower. And she's at the point where she's spitting up lavender petals, meaning that she's at stage 3 right now. We also learn that both Lily and Rose know that the flower has a weird effect on the ponies, and yet Rose still allowed the Crusaders to take one home, showing that she's kind of a scumbag in this AU. In the final scene of this chapter, we cut over to AJ and we see that she's going to Fluttershy's cottage to help her feed her critters. But when she knocks on the door, she doesn't get a reply. So she starts looking around for Shy, and she actually ends up finding her wandering around the woods. And as she gets a good look at her, it's clear that she's sick. Chapter 2 starts with AJ and Dashie making their way to Fluttershy's cottage, and it looks like AJ recruited Dash to help her take care of Shy's critters while she's away at the hospital, getting looked at by Twilight, Starlight, and the hospital staff. And while Dash is trying to assure AJ that Shy will be okay, we can tell that AJ doesn't really believe her. And based on how Shy is looking, I can understand why she has doubts. The next day takes us to the Cutie Crusader clubhouse where Scoot and Apple Bloom were working inside, but they notice pretty quickly that Sweetie Belle hasn't arrived yet, actually been about 30 minutes late. And while they were wondering where she could be, they hear someone calling to them from outside, and they see that it's Rarity. When they go out to speak with her, Rarity reveals that Sweetie has been acting strange ever since she brought home that lavender, basically just staring and sniffing it for hours on end, showcasing that this flower truly does have an addictive property to it. Things got even worse around dinner time. When Rarity called her sister down to eat, she noticed that her eyes had a purplish tint to them, and when Rarity tries to speak to her about it, Sweetie Belle just brushes her off, saying that she's fine, even though she has also started to cough. But I think what is most telling is the fact that Sweetie is starting to get aggressive and snapping at her sister. And while Rarity is stunned at the outburst, the thing that stood out the most was the fact that her sister's nose started to bleed, letting her know that something really is wrong with her. But as of right now, Sweetie is refusing to go to the doctor and has instead decided to lock herself in her room. And that is the main reason that Rarity came to find the other Crusaders. She wants the girls to come back to the boutique to see if they can actually get Sweetie to not only come out of her room, but also go to the hospital. The next scene cuts back to the flower shop, and we see Lily go to the back to check on Daisy, and she sees this. It's clear that Daisy is deep in the infection now, and I wouldn't be surprised if Lily doesn't make it out of that room alive. We also see that Rose was out and about at the time trying to find a cure for Daisy and has finally made it back to the shop. And when she rushes to the back to check on Daisy and Lily, her eyes go wide and she sees Lily, beaten and bruised, but still alive. And the only words that she can get out is that it was Daisy. And then we see that the window in the room is broken, showing that Daisy is now out in Ponyville and things are about to get rough. Now, back over at Rarity and the Crusaders, we see that they've made it back to the boutique, and Rarity is hoping that these two will be able to help her sister, so she sends them into her room to speak with her for a moment. When we cut over to Rarity, we see that she's lying on her bed, staring at the flower, and we can assume that she's been sitting there for hours. The knock on the door manages to break her out of her trance, and then we see Scoot and Apple Bloom walk in, and Sweetie seems to be happy to see them, but they are immediately concerned with how sick she looks. They also realize that Sweetie has the same eyes that Rose had at the flower shop, which is like their first real clue that an outbreak is taking root in Ponyville. As the girls start to speak with Sweetie more, they attempt to get her to seek medical attention, but she just gets mad at them the same way that she did with Rarity. But this time, she also starts to cough up lavender petals, making the fillies worry about her even more. But Sweetie still refuses to get help, telling the girls to get out of her room because they're giving her a headache, leaving Rarity to wonder what's happened to her sweet little sister. After that, we cut over to the hospital and we see Pinky, Spike, Twilight, and Starlight have all come to the hospital to visit Shy, and also to start to try and find a cure for whatever is afflicting her. When we get to see Shy, she seems to be in good spirits, even though one of her eyes is bandaged over. It's kind of sad to see how all the ponies thinks that she's recovering, but we know that she's still in the early stages of the infection and will start to worsen soon if they don't actually find a cure. And the final scene in this chapter kind of alludes to this fact when the nurse calls Twilight over to tell her something about Shy, and based on the look on her face, we know that it isn't good. The next chapter begins with this brief animated flashback. One thing that I noticed is that Zecora was walking in the middle of the pony's hair, and I believe that they think she's some type of enchantress. Because in this flashback, it seems like the ponies have come down with some kind of illness. I love how Twilight is able to keep her cool though and get into the flower shop so that she can actually clear all this up. And surprisingly, when Twilight explains that Zecora is a healer and not some witch, the ponies are quick to believe her and even offer to sell Zecora the herbs that she needs to make a cure for this sickness going around. Now back in present time, we see that Rose is going to go try to find Zecora, obviously to see if she can actually help with whatever this outbreak is. We then cut back over to Twilight and we get to see what Nurse Redheart wanted to tell her. And it turns out that she has run a blood test on Fluttershy and she was able to find the virus in her blood. And when Twilight looks under the microscope, we can clearly see the purple virus cells floating alongside the healthy red cells. The important part here though is the fact that the virus cells can duplicate, meaning that given enough time, the virus will eventually take over. But instead of falling into despair, Twilight is even more determined to find a cure. This is also the moment that Redheart reveals that Lily is also infected, and while this still doesn't make them panic, I think the danger of the lavender virus is really starting to kick in now. The next scene takes place about a day later, and we see Golden Harvest out in the orchard, but as she's getting ready to leave, she hears something moving in the bushes. And then we see Daisy hop out and attack her, leaving a huge puddle of gore here. And just as a fun fact, I like how James and Deer's OCs get to make an appearance at the end of the chapter, which is just a cool little shout out. In the next chapter, we cut back to Rose, and she's running through the woods, making her way to Zecora's hut. But on her way there, she starts to feel a pain in her chest and also a ringing in her ears, which I think is a sign that the infection is spreading within her, and she'll likely be moving over to stage 2 soon if she can't find a cure. Now, once she finally makes it to Zecora's home, she starts screaming her name and asking for help, only to find out that she doesn't seem to be in her hut. With that, we're left with a bit of a cliffhanger, and then we cut to a new scene that takes place the next day, and we see a bunch of ponies just walking around town looking happy and unbothered, really. And we also learn that the Apple siblings and Sugar Belle are getting like some special bakery event set up here in the market and are waiting for Golden Harvest to arrive with some of the apples. And when Sugar asks AJ about Golden Harvest, no one seems to know where she is. And that makes sense because, we all know that she was ambushed. And thinking that Harvest has just been overworked, AJ grabs her sister and they set out to go help her. But when we cut back to that part of the orchard, we see Harvest trying her best to limp away from Daisy, as she looks truly monstrous at this point. Now, after walking for a bit, AJ and Bloom see Golden Harvest stumble into town, and then all hell breaks loose. I really appreciate the fact that even though Harvest knew she was done for, she still made her way back to town and tried to warn everybody. It does kind of suck that now there are 2 infected actively attacking people, but I think that her heart was in the right place. After running for a bit, Bloom and AJ are able to find their way to Big Mac and Sugar while also managing to dodge any of the infected ponies. But AJ is smart enough to know that some kind of outbreak is happening and it's about to start spreading like wildfire. And with that, we move over to Lavender Blossom again, and she has more information concerning the infection. She's basically given us a more detailed explanation of the infection process and what ponies will look like after being bitten or scratched. We get to see how infected ponies start to think of themselves as predators, and all the clean ponies basically become prey. And I know I say it a lot, but this is very similar to 28 Days Later, or more specifically, the Rage virus. We also get to see how the infected ponies hunt, and as you can see here, they develop an extra set of teeth once they're infected, and they appear more like fangs. And if that wasn't bad enough, when we look at this example here, we can see that all these dark marks on the ponies' necks are where the extra teeth actually penetrate into flesh. It kind of reminds me of the aliens from the Alien series and how they had like an extra mouth inside the main head. We also see that once a pony is bitten, the lavender virus will be injected into their bloodstream, which means that they may be able to survive if they immediately remove the limb, but since the virus takes root so quickly, that likely won't work. And of course, once the virus makes it to the brain, the infection will take over and begin bursting out of the pony's body. Next, we get to see how scratches work with the infected, and it doesn't come from the hooves, but rather from the lavender branches that come out of the pony's backs that act more like stingers that thrust into any exposed flesh that they can find. And of course, once the ponies are at that stage, they are pretty much lifeless puppets being piloted by the lavender virus. Now, over with the next chapter, we get to pick back up with Rose Luck, and she's in front of Zecora's hut. When she sees the state of the home, she immediately thinks that Zecora has been infected. But as she's looking around, she spots a book that Zecora showed her some time ago, and she remembers that this book has a bunch of natural remedies inside. The bad news is that one of the infected is also inside of the home and manages to sneak up on her, practically having its branches on her face before she even knew it was there. While we don't get to see who this infected is, I'm really hoping that it isn't Zecora. The creator leaves us on another cliffhanger, and then we move back over to Big Mac and Sugar Belle, who is rightfully freaking out. But I'm happy to see that AJ has been able to keep her wits, and she's come up with a plan to basically go and examine the infected so that she can see if they have any weaknesses or if they may be able to just like make a run for it. Now, as AJ is looking out the door, she sees Golden Harvest going after Cherryberry, and while I think AJ wants to help, she knows that there's really nothing that she can do, especially with Apple Bloom freaking out behind her. And after taking a little bit more time to think, AJ grabs an empty bottle and tells her siblings to bring her some liquor and a cloth. And 1 hour later, she's ready to enact her plan, which involves them all wearing masks because there's purple smoke or spores floating around the town, and then trying to sneak out. But when they were about halfway through the square, they hear some weird sounds, and AJ goes to check it out and ends up throwing this Molotov cocktail into this crowd of infected, which is kind of smart considering that they are now partly plants, so the fire should be really effective. With this new distraction, the crew thinks that they have a clear way out, but then we see that an infected has their trail. Before they see it though, they hear it, and it turns out that it's Daisy, and she begins to run them down. Seeing a wagon out in the distance, the group rushes forward, but Apple Bloom ends up tripping, and not wanting to see her sister get infected, AJ rushes back to help her. And seeing this, Big Mac also turns around to help. And it's a good thing that he did, because now that AJ is carrying her sister, she is much slower and Daisy is closing the distance way too fast. But before she can actually strike them down, Big Mac doesn't hesitate and he throws himself into Daisy. A few minutes later, we see AJ, Apple Bloom, and eventually Big Mac all make it back to the cart, but Big Mac has a bunch of bites and scratches all over his legs. Apple Bloom starts to break down, not wanting to see her brother get turned into an infected, but Big Mac just tells AJ to take care of his girlfriend and the rest of the family, and that he'll be in paradise with their parents soon. He hugs his little sister, and then he takes the remaining Molotovs, ready to buy his family as much time as he can with his final moments. But before the battle can actually start, we see Sugar appear at his side, saying that she knows that he's going to sacrifice himself and that she wants to join him. She simply loves him too much and wants to be with him wherever he is, even if that place is in the afterlife. And with that, the two of them prepare for this final battle, throwing the remaining Molotovs and setting the square on fire. And with one final act of defiance, the two of them embrace, dying with a smile on their faces, even as the infected scream and bear down on them. And I have to say, this whole scene really got me. Big Mac sacrificing himself for his little sister feels on point for his character, and his girlfriend stand behind to have a final stand with him is just kind of peak emotional damage, and I love it.
Except it's a terrible day for rain.
In the next scene, we get to see that Bloom and AJ manage to get out of the town, and as to be expected, Bloom is taking the death of her brother really hard. And really not knowing what to say, AJ starts to sing to her sister.
The seasons change and leaves may fall, but I'll be with you through them all. And rain or shine, you'll always be mine.
And then she reassures her by letting her know that Big Mac will be in heaven with their parents now. And with that, the pair of them set off to go find Granny Smith and Grandpere, not wanting anyone else to pass away. In the next chapter, we cut back to Roseluck and we see her running through the forest, although we still don't know who's chasing her. While running, we see that she starts to have another flashback, this time with Lily screaming at her, asking what she did to Daisy. And we see this image of her laid next to this midnight lavender plant, reiterating that Rose is the one that actually started this whole outbreak. And I think this is why she is so hell-bent on finding a cure. But as she's running, she ends up taking a tumble and knocking herself out, as she falls down this hill. And as she's coming back to consciousness, we see an infected hovering over her. But for some reason, it leaves her, broken on this forest floor. We are left on a cliffhanger again, shifting from Rose back over to Dashie, who, funny enough, is just chilling on this cloud, unaware of how bad things are actually getting down below. But just then, she begins to hear screaming coming from Ponyville, letting her know that all isn't well. We then cut to Pinky and Scoot, and I love that Pinky is keeping her company and trying to get her mind off the fact that Sweetie Belle is still sick. Eventually, the pair decide to go check on Sweetie to see if they can get her to eat or play a board game or just get her away from that plant. Also want to point out that Pinky's little danger sense starts to go off, which means that something bad is coming their way, and I like how she's aware of this. And as they're making their way to town, it doesn't take them long to see what this bad thing is. Now, seeing all these ponies in trouble, Pinky remembers the Cake family and starts heading to the bakery, hoping that they're alright. But as they're actually walking, we notice that the lavender spores are thick in the air now, and they also run into a few infected ponies. But right as it looks like Scoot and Pinky are caught, we see Dashie in the sky, and she uses a move called the Sonic Rainbow to get rid of the infected. And while that does buy them some time, they can hear other infected getting closer to them, making them have to make a run for the Cake's bakery. And in the next scene, we see them rushing for the bakery as Golden Harvest is close on their heels and almost catches Scoot with one of her branches. Luckily though, the attack misses and Dash is able to pick her up, put her on her back, and fly the rest of the way to the bakery. I also love the fact that it looks like Golden is going to catch them for a moment, but Pinky comes in clutch with the old confetti cannon and buys them the time they need to get inside. Although, they're definitely not safe as Golden bangs on the door of the bakery. And seeing that Mr. Cake won't be able to hold this door for long, Dashy lets Scoot know that she's going to go outside and try to distract the infected. And as Golden Harvest continues to bang on the door, we see Dash appear above her, and she calls out to the infected, getting her attention before taking off and forcing Golden to chase after her. And by doing so, she gives the adults, and more importantly the children inside, more time to hide away from these infected. A few days later, Pinky calls Scoot down to the kitchen to see some ponies that actually survived the outbreak and made it to the bakery. It's hard to tell who they are at first because they all have on these hazmat suits, but when this pony right here removes her helmet, we see that it's Dashy, and she was able to survive being a decoy, and she even found a bunch of ponies who had supplies and were able to get her these hazmat suits. And of course, this is how she managed to not get infected being outside for so long, breathing in all that lavender smoke. These other two ponies here seem to be Cherryberry, who I guess managed to escape being attacked by that infected earlier, and this pony here is a Shoeshine. And luckily, they have a bunch more of these hazmat suits, which means that if they can get every pony fitted with one, they won't have to worry about breathing in those spores anymore. Which of course means that they'll be able to move around town a bit more safely. In the final scene of this chapter, we see Dash and Scoot talking about what they should do next because staying at this bakery doesn't seem like a good idea. And the best option that they can come up with is going over to Twilight's castle because that will probably be an easier place to stay safe and just defend in general. Next we move over to chapter 8 and it begins with Rose finally waking up and somehow her body seems to have healed itself. And even though she still wants to find a cure, she wants to go check on Lily first, considering that she's been gone for a long time now. But when she makes it back to town, she sees that the square is completely empty. Or as she says, it's a ghost town. And even when she starts moving house to house looking through the windows, she still doesn't see any pony, thinking that maybe some were hiding inside. As she continues to walk, she's feeling more and more guilty, thinking that all of this is her fault. But before she can fall too deeply into despair, she runs into Zecora. And I find it interesting that she is still having regrets about how she treated Zecora in the past, even though she's apologized to her a while back. And in this moment, she's ready to approach her again, intent on apologizing for the rumors that she spread in the past. But as she gets closer, she hears Zecora start to growl, and she sees branches start to come out of her back and chest. But right as Zecora is getting ready to attack her, Rose wakes up, showing that this whole scene was a dream, which makes sense when you think about it. There was no way that she should have completely healed and been free of the infection after taking that fall. And speaking of the infection, we see that it has almost fully taken her over now, meaning that she isn't going to be able to keep her sanity for much longer, and she's running out of time to find this cure. But not knowing what else to do, she starts heading back to town to check on Daisy and then the hospital, thinking maybe they can actually help her recover. But as she gets closer to town, she hears the screams of all the ponies and starts to freak out, knowing that this is her fault. After that, we cut back over to Rarity, who is in her home, worried sick about Sweetie Belle. And I kind of love the fact that as she's venting here, Opal is just listening like a little support cat. Now, while she's speaking, she hears some banging on the window, and when she goes to take a look, she sees Drizzle looking absolutely terrified before an infected tackles them and begins to maul them. Freaking out from the scene, Rarity decides to go find Twilight and let her know what's happening. But then, Sweetie Belle comes out of her room. Not wanting to leave her little sister behind, Rarity tries to get her to come with her, but Sweetie just starts to laugh, and then we see this. I think Sweetie is getting close to the point of no return, and to put a point on this, she passes out soon after revealing herself, and then we cut to black. The next scene takes place at the hospital, and we see that Twilight is still working on a cure and only stops when Spike comes to speak with her. And with their conversation, we learn that she is having no luck with finding this cure, thinking that finding it for this particular virus may be impossible. And Spike points out that this plant doesn't behave like any other plant that they've come across thus far. It simply makes ponies feel rage and thrusts them into madness. But he also points out that when he was reading a botanical book, he found a plant called Prunella vulgaris. And while I know this sounds like a spell from Harry Potter, it's actually a real plant, and it's known as a heal-all. It can be used to bring down fever, lower inflammation, and it allows people to heal injuries a bit faster. And it so happens that Spike has some of this plant on hand. The only downside here is that he's not for sure if this will work, but when you really think about it, they don't really have anything to lose, so it's better to just try and see what happens. So with that, the two of them go and begin the process of turning the plant into a liquid form to make it easy to inject into the infected ponies. And once they have the solution, they test it out on his blood sample. And as Twilight is observing how the solution interacts with the virus, she gets a look of relief on her face and lets Spike and Redheart know that they found a cure. Now over with Nurse Sweetheart and Snowheart, we see that they have noticed the purple smoke outside and all the ponies screaming. And while Sweetheart is getting a bad feeling about it, Snow just thinks that this is another prank. Or that is until she looks out the window and sees ponies running for their lives and being mutilated by the vines of the infected. After seeing this, both of the nurses start to panic, wondering if they're going to be able to escape the town or if they should just lock down the hospital until this all blows over. But before they can get too deep into their planning, Nurse Tenderheart comes through the door and says that there's an emergency. They just received a new patient and she needs help ASAP. When the nurses rush over to the next room, they see Rarity there carrying her little sister. And while at first I thought that Rarity was infected, as I look closer, I think this is just her mascara running. Now, after their moment of shock passes, the nurses tell Rarity to take her sister to the emergency room so that they can aid her. And I'm really hoping that she isn't too far gone to receive the cure yet, because that would just be terrible timing. Next, we cut over to Starlight and we see that she's watching over Shy, and then Twilight, Spike, and Redheart come into the room and let them know that they found a possible cure and actually may be able to save Fluttershy. And I was happy to see that when they woke Shy up, she seems to still have all her senses, even though she's been infected for a while now. And seeing this, Twilight doesn't want to give the infection more time to spread, so she goes ahead and injects Shy with the cure. And we see that she immediately passes out, and when she wakes back up, it will either be as a healthy pony or an infected beast. While that is happening, we see that Dr. Stable is looking over Lily, and he notices that her illness seems to be more severe than what he saw with Fluttershy, and this gives him a bad feeling. And almost immediately after he says that, Lily pops out of bed and begins snarling and growling at the doctor. By the time the nurses get there, Lily has already impaled the doctor and is now on the loose in the hospital looking for her next victim. And she quickly finds the back of Snowheart. And to my surprise, instead of asking for help, she tells the other nurse to leave her and go help the other patients, worrying more about their safety than her own. And even though Sweetheart doesn't want to leave her behind, eventually she books it out of there. And then we see that with the last of her strength, Snowheart actually hits the emergency alarm, letting every pony in the hospital know that they're in danger. Hearing this, Twilight and Starlight decide to grab Fluttershy and make a run for it. But before they can leave, we see this scene. Lily has the group trapped in this room and she's ready for a fight, and Twilight is more than willing to engage. And for a moment, it looks like Twilight may have the firepower and the defenses to put this infected down. But since this creature no longer actually feels pain and is just a walking mold, kind of like the creatures from Resident Evil 7, it's able to actually wear her down. And seeing that Twilight is starting to get tired and her defenses are failing, Spike joins the battle using his fire breath on the creature while it was distracted and forcing it to flee from the fight. And we really shouldn't be surprised that fire is super effective against this monster. Spike should have joined the fight a long time ago, if we're being honest. Now, after thanking Spike for saving her, the group heads out, wanting to get away from the hospital. But as they're making their way out the door, Twilight spots Rarity standing over her sick sister. She's trying to get one of the nurses or the doctor to come see to her sister, unaware of the danger going on in the hospital. But unfortunately, she's too late to get her sister help because we see Sweetie start to sprout purple vines, showing that she truly is too far gone now. And I think this image right here really seals the deal. Knowing what needs to be done, Twilight takes matters into her own hands and puts Sweetie Belle down, knowing that Rarity won't be able to do it herself. But put what you think down in the comments. Was Twilight right to take Sweetie Belle out even though Rarity clearly didn't want her to do so, or do you think she overstepped here? Now, in the final chapter of this series, we get another informational, but it starts off with Ponyville completely engulfed in this purple smoke, and then we see Rose running through the town, looking absolutely terrified. She then has another flashback to a time when she traveled to Sakura's cottage to learn more about her potion making, leaving us on another cliffhanger. Finally, we get to see Lavender blossom again, and she's giving us more information on the cure and how it affects ponies at different stages of the infection. Now, it looks like if you can get the cure while you're still at stage 1, you are guaranteed to survive, and it also only takes about 5 minutes to fully run its course. The only downside is that the pony's eyes will forever have a light purplish tint to them, which actually looks kinda cool if you ask me. Now, if a pony gets the cure at stage 2, it will take about 20 minutes to fully cleanse the body. The side effect at this stage is that their hooves will go from that dark purple color to being like a lilac or a pastel color, and their horns or wings will have little flowers growing out of them, but the flowers are harmless, so that's not really a big deal either. The same thing will also happen to any scratch wounds that the ponies have as well. Now, when we move over to stage 3, this is where we see that the cure can run into some issues. When a pony is injected at this stage, there's a 50-50 chance that they'll be cured, and the process takes about 45 minutes to work. It's kind of sad to learn this now, because it means that if Twilight could have made it to Sweetie Belle just a few minutes sooner, or if Rarity would have forced Belle to go to the hospital faster, she probably could have given her the cure while she was still at stage 3. In that way, she would have at least had a chance to survive. Next, we see that if the cure does fail, the only option that you have is just to put the pony down or set it on fire. But if the pony gets lucky and they do recover, it basically has the same visual changes of the ponies who were cured at stage 1 and 2. Now, something interesting that pops up for a split second is this image of another flower with a bunch of text that seems to be nonsense. But people in the comments of the original video were able to decipher it. The translation that I read was from Bagataria, and it reads, "I have a deadly nightshade, so twisted does it grow, with berries black as midnight and a skull as white as snow. The vicar's cocky young son came to drink my tea. He touched me without asking. Now he's buried neath a tree." And now, it may just be me, but I feel like this is written by Zecora just because of the rhyming. It kind of is a giveaway, but I also could be wrong. After that, we get to see a stage 4 infected, and as to be expected, these ponies are so aggressive at this point that it's almost impossible to get close enough to give them a cure. But even if some pony could, it would have no effect on them at this point because they are not only fully infected, but no longer alive. The only option left at this point is to put the pony down and hopefully not get infected in the process. The final thing we hear in this AU is some Morse code at the end of this video, and it says, "Roseluck's memories will be revealed soon. Stay tuned." And I assume that this means that we'll finally get to actually learn what's really going on between her and Zecora and why we keep getting left on all these cliffhangers. Unfortunately, this is where the story ends for now, and just like I said at the start of this video, this is one of the best My Little Pony AUs that I've read thus far. The animation styles are amazing, and the story is unique enough to make it stand out. I love the way that this infection can spread just by the pony smelling the lavender plant. That idea that simply breathing the air can be dangerous is such a nice little twist. And I also have to say that the storytelling and drama of this one was on point. When Big Mac and Sugar sacrificed themselves, I actually choked up a little bit. And I also have to shout out Nurse Snowheart as well, because she also went out like a G. I can truly say that I'm excited to see where this AU goes, and I'm really hoping that this is one that actually gets finished. But with that being said, if you enjoyed this video, check out this video on the screen here, subscribe to Daily Crime Member of the Orseofkorse, and we'll see you next time with another one. Peace, peace.